So we're going to be talking about regulations today. If you're familiar with Vancouver, you'll know that it's a bit of maybe a word I can't use on stage. It's a bit of a mess in terms of regulations, and it's a good thing we've got John here to help us go over that. So John, I'm going to kick it off by asking you, what is the legislative framework and role of the provinces, local governments, and other bodies, such as the BC Agricultural Land Commission, since legalization in October 2018?
Thank you. I think we have 23 different countries here, so we thought it would be useful to sort of give you the different framework that exists in Canada. But after listening to Dori, I'm reminded of the family motto, which is, history cannot be denied. And we obviously have history repeating itself, just as what happened with alcohol. The bottom line being, local governments are the problem that you have to overcome in order to get the market to really take off. Anyway, in Canada, criminal law is a federal power, unlike the US. And so that explains a bit of a difference why you've got all your states now making it legal. Historically, you had all your states making it illegal before your federal government, and now it's unwinding. So the criminal law power is federal. And what we've done here is we have legalized a little bit, we have decriminalized a little bit with the ticketing scheme that kicks in after the legal part, and we have kept in an awful lot of criminal law. So the Cannabis Act and the cannabis regulations are still criminal law. The federal government says it's still using the criminal law, and it has allowed the provinces to be involved in distribution. So production, various rules to do with promotion and advertising and all of that is, as was mentioned earlier, taken from the tobacco industry, is controlled federally. The province now controls distribution, and so that's the dispensaries. And as you may know from a certain case where a lady allowed the people to come to a garden party, the police saw 3 plants in public view.
It was in Revelstoke, right?
That's right. You're not allowed to do that. So, but then you've got local government. And so not only towns, cities, municipalities, of course, zoning, licensing, all of these sorts of things, but also we have the Agricultural Land Commission, for example, which is a provincial body that recently said we don't want to be involved in applications for people wanting to grow cannabis anymore. It's a designated farm use if you're in an agricultural area. So we're going to pass to the local governments the power to decide various questions about whether you can do what you want to do. Because now you can only grow in soil, for example. Since last July, if you've got a building in the Agricultural Land Reserve already, fine, you can produce inside that building, but if you don't, you can only do it in soil. And so greenhouses are going to be the way that people will be able to do it. So then you'll have a place like Richmond, BC, where the airport is, which will say, we're very jealous about our industrial uses, so you can't do it in an industrial area, you have to do it in an agricultural area. So you have all of these conflicting positions being taken by either different bodies or local governments. And to do whatever you want to do in the cannabis scene, you're going to have to, A, give notice to local governments and get their permission or approval or support. So just like in the old alcohol days, we have wet areas and we have dry areas, and it's going to take some time in order to get them to move along. In Abbotsford, where I am, and where I live in Mission, it's like a wait and see, even though we've had people involved in the industry in and around the area for an awful long time. So that's the basic framework. I could obviously get into it in a lot more detail, but
well, thanks for explaining that, John. You know, given all of that, I imagine, and I know for a fact, you know, British Columbia, Vancouver in particular, has been a pretty important place when it comes to recognizing, you know, medical need for cannabis. So my next question is for Dori. Dori, in what ways has legalization impacted your medical customers. It should be on already, I think, at the dispensary you manage downtown.
Well, the customers are being largely ignored by the government program while they take this wait-and-see attitude, and they'll review it in a few years. Because so many stores have been closed down in such quick ways without any contingency plans whatsoever, they're getting to meet a lot more sick people while they wait in line for their medicine, which is a problem for sick people, because one of the reasons we wanted so many dispensaries open was so that people would be able to get quickly served and have time with their dispenser. And that's being taken away from them. They are being told that they can just get their needs met at a legal store. And yet, if we asked Andrew what's allowed on his shelf today compared to what was allowed or what he had on his shelves before, it would be largely different, and people's needs aren't being met. They're not able to get the lotions and creams in the manner that they got them before, and the prices are not affordable for the kind of people that I serve in my dispensary. Andrew's not allowed to have a dispensary, so don't call it that. It's a cannabis retail outlet. Though dispensing goes on behind those doors, it's not allowed to be called that. So there's no compassion allowed to be, though they have it in their hearts, they're not allowed to serve it in their store. And that's the part that people are fearing for right now, is who's going to take care of them? Where are they going to be able to go and get the cookies and the lotion and the little bit of love that they're looking for every day? Because it's not just about weed on the shelves, it's about love and caring that also happens with these people while they're getting their medicine. So.
Thanks, Dori. 100%. So Andrew, pardon me. Andrew, you're on the other side of things. And I'd like to know, having gone through the transition and receiving your license to operate in Vancouver, what are some of the opportunities you see for Kiaro and other legal retailers in British Columbia?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone this morning. Opportunity abounds. We're really at the ground level here, and we can really go up from here. I mean, if you're watching the numbers at all, British Columbia with $19 million in sales since legalization is a figure that should really draw a lot of attention to really the issue at hand here. Dori speaks to, a well-established and entrenched medical market here that has expectations and needs. And, the current regime isn't serving those needs. We're in a period of transition. We have to acknowledge that as well. It takes patience and perseverance and sacrifice to move through this transitionary phase. I think about it as myself as a medical patient and the situation people are put in. And, I have PTSD, and I recall just serving so many people that, had conditions and illnesses where this was their only option. So my heart goes out to them. I am encouraged every day, though, by the amazing people, not only in this room, but in our community and around the world that are pushing hard for cannabis. We owe it to them to get this right, and I'm incredibly encouraged by the fact that we have done it before, and we will do it again. And I brought, I was thinking about this question, Amanda, and I brought a poem by Rudyard Kipling called If, and I'm just going to read a small segment of it because I find it incredibly inspiring, because this is so poignant to where we are today. If you can keep your head about you, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about and don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat with those two imposters just the same. And this is an important line here, and this is what really struck me to share this today is, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make traps for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop down and build them up with worn out tools. And I think about that, and I think about Dori, I think about John, and I think about the patients in this community that I can't have that conversation with anymore, and it hurts a lot every day. And I talk to our retail staff about this, and I go, we're still empowered. We can still be inspiring. We can still connect with people and provide solutions. Adam Greenblatt came up with this great line at the last LIFT conference. He talked about creative compliance. And that's what I'm pushing towards at Kiaro, and that's what I'm pushing towards in my work with ACRES, the Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers. We're reuniting, we're invigorating, we're bringing this train home again. And it's going to take some time. It's not perfect. This is a process, and it sucks most of the time, to be frank with you. To see what you've built broken and have to stoop down, to stoop after all we've built and sacrificed and proven, right? That is probably the most tragic part of it all. But again, I'm incredibly encouraged. We've done it before. We can do it again. We're going to continue to do it. We're building strong relationships with our supply chain that are going to be responsive to this need. We're holding the government accountable. We're continuing to advocate. This message isn't being lost for those of us who have transitioned. I know they're working hard. Again, ostensibly, they can't always share all the information they want to, but the power of anecdote, the power of research, the greatest victim of prohibition is now coming to light. The power of this room. I'm incredibly encouraged. So,
Thank you so much for your honesty and for that poem. That was amazing. Thanks, Andrew. I might need a second. So my next question is for John. John, can you tell us about a specific appeal in Vancouver involving Karuna Health? Some people in the room might know the name, and the way that dispensary sort of fits into Vancouver bylaws. How does this intersect with the constitutional question of reasonable access for medical patients?
Well, I should have mentioned in the opening, the federal government has kept control over medical. And so while health constitutionally is a divided field between the feds and the provinces, they've kept control. So I incorporated the BC Compassion Club Society, it was 1997, so more than 20 years ago. They had rave reviews from all of the task forces and everybody that's ever looked into it and holding it up as a good model. And then, of course, the federal government came along and didn't provide for medical dispensaries in the Cannabis Act or regulations. And so there is going to be another court case that seeks to declare that genuine medical dispensaries, compassion clubs, are part of reasonable access. You should understand that here in Canada, the Constitution provides in Section 7 that you have the right to life, liberty, and the security of your person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with something called the principles of fundamental justice. And the court first, way back in 2001, the Ontario Court of Appeal, and more recently the Federal Court Trial Division in Allard, confirmed that the federal government has to provide medical exemptions for medically approved patients to prevent the violation of the security of their person, having established that what they did in the past was to do that arbitrarily, which is contrary to principles of fundamental justice. So constitutional rights are involved when it comes to medical. So the City of Vancouver, much to its credit, passed bylaws to enable medical dispensaries, among others, and but some of them weren't able to meet the rules, such as being 300 meters from the nearest school, another compassion club or dispensary, these sorts of rules. And so ultimately an injunction was brought to shut them down. So again, I credit the City of Vancouver for, unlike Toronto, using the police right at the outset to shut everybody down, and using the civil process here instead of the police to have the issues resolved in a civil manner. But in any event, These were the ones that couldn't meet the requirements of the bylaws, called themselves medical dispensaries, and interestingly, the government didn't challenge that. So it went to court, and we counter-petitioned to say that they were part of reasonable access. And we had a patient running a club, we got standing, we did the full argument and everything, and then the judge decided not to decide the constitutional question, which we're appealing, and the appeal is set for sometime in November, I believe. But basically, the court ruled that the bylaws were valid and that these folks had to comply with the bylaws, and that it would be unwise, is the way he put it, to decide the constitutional question. So there is a better way to handle that issue, and that's going to be another application in the Federal Court Trial Division to seek that type of a declaration. You've probably heard something similar is going to occur with respect to these limitations in terms of 10 milligrams in the edibles and the extracts and so on. Because you know that medical patients in Canada, since the Smith case, Kirk Tousaw is here somewhere, was the main counsel, established that medical patients are entitled to possess cannabis in any of its forms. They're not limited to dried cannabis. But they have to make it themselves. And so again, many of them have been waiting for these dispensaries to be able to provide them with high-end extracts and so on that they require for their medical condition. But the government, in its short-sightedness, is worried about novice users consuming too much or accidentally taking too much, as opposed to giving priority to prevent the violation of the constitutional rights of medical patients to ensure that they get what they need in order to, in some cases, survive. And so basically, the Karuna appeal is there. I'm not optimistic that the Court of Appeal is necessarily going to grab the issue, so we're probably going to have to relitigate it in federal court along with the extracts issue.
Thanks, John. That's a really nice way to segue into my next question for Dori. So some of you in the audience may know that on October 17th of this year, regulations in Canada are going to change so that we can have edibles, extracts, and topicals brought into the mix. So Dori, given those new regulations, how do you foresee them, the regulations on the recreational market, impacting medical users and consumers overall? I see you're unwrapping some goodies over there for us.
Well, I understand that everybody's use of cannabis is different, and everybody has different needs. I also understand that we all learn in a different way too. And so I wanted to do something that was just a little bit visual to help you understand this concept. So I'm going to make the case for and against 10 milligram cookies. So if we have all of our cookies have to be 10 milligrams, and I need 200 milligrams, this is how many cookies I'm going to need to eat at once.
That's a lot of cookies.
Okay, this is 2,300 calories in cookies. They're 130 calories each. Where's the room for broccoli if we're just eating cookies like this? So the issues that I see are all this excess packaging. We already know that that's an issue. I see obesity, diabetes, and a host of other medical problems that go along with expecting people to eat all this sugar, chocolate, flour, all the other ingredients that go along with this to get somebody up to a 200 milligram dose. So I said I would make a for and against. If all of our cookies were 200 milligrams and we have the lightweights, we would need to be serving pieces of cookie this big. This is one cookie cut up into 20 pieces this morning. this can be satisfying for somebody that's on a diet and only needs the 10 milligrams. But it's just not a reasonable way to have people pack their cookies around. So it's okay to have a 10 milligram cookie clearly labeled, but I think it's okay to have a 200 milligram cookie clearly labeled, just like a 500 milligram cookie clearly labeled. So I hope that before October 17th comes along, that people start to really contemplate what this 10 milligram dosage is going to cause, because this isn't just a medicinal problem, this is a recreational problem as well. Some people, 5 milligrams, they only need this and they're going to be high all day long. Some people would need to eat 5 times that in a day to even start to feel it. So let's not cause another health problem while we're trying to save people from cannabis.
Thank you, Dori, for that show and tell. It's very effective. My next question is for Andrew. Obviously, consumers in Vancouver, we're pretty spoiled. And, we're used to being able to access a wide variety of strains, of products. How can regulated retailers compete against the entrenched market in Vancouver?
Yeah, that's a great and important question. The short answer is we can't. Flat out. They have better quality, better variety. They have a consumer base that knows who they are and are habituated in that transaction process. I'm not trying to compete against the illicit market. That's a natural progression that'll happen over time. When you start, looking at some of the established markets in the States, this takes 5-7 years to start to see that erosion, and it has to happen through transition. And it has to happen through integration. So that's what I try and focus on as a retailer. I want that market in our market providing products and building solutions and helping with the dialogue and moving the needle on key social issues, because they've been doing it the longest. And if we don't get that intellectual talent and that human capital into the cannabis pool in the regulated environment, then it's going to be a pretty insipid pool, and it's not going to be, meeting the needs of consumers. So I don't try and compete against that. I try and integrate. I serve as a director of ACRES, and we really work to advocate and lobby government on important issues to help integrate the legacy market into the regulated environment. And that is a vital mission that over the next 3 to 5 years is going to take a concerted effort of all of us in this room and all of us in this country and community to really push for, because these people help build the opportunity we have. And if we're not responsive to that, A, just because we need the talent, and B, because it's really owed through this process of legalization to help get people through. And, as someone who has transitioned successfully, I want to use that open door to bring others with me and to really build positive and purposeful momentum behind that. There are larger existential threats in our industry, and I would say, and I know the government, is working hard, and I have empathy for regulators, but, the BCLDB is actually more on my radar for competition than the illicit market is, to be honest with you. They don't have a cap on the number of stores that they can have in British Columbia. They can pay their frontline staff $30 an hour. They can do revenue sharing with communities. Those are distinctive advantages that if you're a community that's sitting on the fence about cannabis, that's a much safer, more ostensibly stable option to choose from. And we're seeing that starting to happen in communities across the GVRD. So for me, I'm focused on those things and on the regulations themselves. I try and compliment Minister Farnworth when I see him about the progression we're seeing with the LCRB, and applications are starting to get through. We got 63 licensed, we got 68 in AIP, we got 300 or more under community review. So those are encouraging numbers. We're way behind, but we're getting there. But window opacity. This is, for me, like almost issue number one. You look at destigmatizing and naturalizing and integrating cannabis into the social context in a meaningful way. Having opaque windows is not achieving that at all. And I look at operators, Jeff at Muse. People were walking by, didn't even know he was open. That's tragic. When you look at the amount of investment and infrastructure and training that goes into building a regulated retail store in Canada, it's a tremendously daunting experience. So, again, for me, I'm looking at the BCLDB actually more than I'm looking at the illicit market. It factors in, obviously, when you look at, online, there's a big market there. And, we operate in 2 provinces. In Saskatchewan, we have shops in Saskatoon and in L'Orange. And online sales there are pretty dismal. And that's the kind of, word on the street with most of the operators because, again, everyone's getting what they need online. They're getting the topicals, they're getting the edibles, things they really, really want and need. I'm excited about the phase 2 products coming in because that's going to make a big shift and create a big opportunity for the regulated retailers to help meet some of that market need and help that market transition over. I'm concerned that it's going to be the same dynamic out the gate that it was with flour and oil, where it's not going to be great out the gate. It's going to be a lot of challenges and uncertainty on the supply chain in terms of consistency. But, we're going to get there. We're going to keep pushing, keep advocating. This is not perfect. It is a process. And we have to keep our stakeholders engaged and educated on that. And so, we really work at Kiaro to keep that conversation moving forward in a positive, purposeful direction. I don't want to whine and complain aimlessly. We really have to focus on what our needs are, what our goals are, work to build a community and consensus and cohesion around those, and go get it. We've done it before. We made legalization happen. I'm incredibly proud of that, being a part of that movement and that momentum. And we got a long way to go. It is not perfect. People are hurt. People are not getting their medicine. And there is a huge entrenched market that's not transitioning because they don't see the opportunity yet. And so we got to advocate for them. Keep pushing the needle on making sure we're reducing those barriers to entry, creating more viable, sustainable business opportunities for them to see in front of them. And looking at the regulated environment right now, it's a big challenge. So again, we just got to stay positive and purposeful, keep pushing it, and offer that personalized service to consumers. They'll keep coming back if they start getting some rapport and relationship. And so we're focused on really training our staff incredibly well to build strong relationships at the counter. And that's going to build the rapport and the referrals we need to weather the storm here in the next few years.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate that point you made about competing with the LDB. Definitely, yeah. So John, another question for you. We touched a little bit on creative compliance. Now, if the BC Cannabis Control and Licensing Act doesn't apply to medical cannabis, but the definition of a cannabis store in the Vancouver bylaw includes a compassion club, what should the compassion club and medical dispensaries do in Vancouver to prevent being shut down?
Well, as I think was mentioned earlier, the government here clearly was hoping that medical would disappear and go into the rec stores and there wouldn't be any medical dispensaries. That's clearly what they intended. The City of Vancouver, again, in putting its bylaw together, created a category that was a compassion club. And so while some of the dispensaries have, I think, what was it, $30,000 fee, the compassion club's only a $1,000 fee. And they also have a wellness center that goes with it and so on. So again, Vancouver had foresight in terms of the plan and what everybody expected the feds would do originally and provide for medical dispensaries or compassion clubs. So the community safety team is the group that is now from various police agencies going around the province trying to close people down if you don't have an application going through the provincial system for a rec license. And they were telling the Compassion Club and others that's what they should do. If you've got your application in, it's my understanding they'll leave you alone as it's going through the process. So bearing in mind that medical is still controlled by the feds, one of the licenses under the Cannabis Act is you've got a license to produce, a license to process, a nursery license, and so on. One of them is a license for sale, and there's a subclass license that's to sell for medical purposes. So my position has been, and I've taken this up with the community safety team, that the compassion clubs and true medical dispensaries are not recreational. The Provincial Act expressly says so, that it doesn't apply to medical cannabis. So I'm having them apply for a license to sell for medical purposes, and I'm saying as long as they're in the process applying for their license to sell for medical purposes, which they've been doing for the last 20 plus years, you should also be leaving them alone. And by the way, if you do go in there and try to shut them down, remember, you're going to be interfering with the constitutional rights of medically approved patients. And they will have a remedy for the violation of their constitutional rights if you do that. So be aware that you're dealing with a different type of entity. Now, again, the Vancouver bylaw expressly has a definition of a cannabis store. Interestingly enough, in the Karuna case, they were trying to say that their prior definitions simply allowed the Compassion Club to be an advocate for medical as opposed to actually providing cannabis. But the definition of a cannabis store now in the bylaw clearly includes a Compassion Club, interestingly enough, and clearly makes it clear that you can sell cannabis for, in the case of a Compassion Club, for medical purposes. But we need to get that federal license first. So we do have a good argument, I think, here in Vancouver to try and get the federal license in order to get the city license as a cannabis store, but as a Compassion Club. So that hopefully we'll see that develop. That's, again, if they turn us down, we will be looking at the courts in order to try and remedy the situation. So it's always encouraging to hear again from Lori Ajax what she said about California, and I've heard this from others, how they do prioritize the medical in the stores and are able to run them both together. Here, unfortunately, they've just left it as rec, and they haven't made any provision for the medical. And we will continue to battle away in order to get this sorted out one way or another.
Thank goodness for John, ever diligent. I've got one last question for Andrew, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I think you started to touch on this a little bit at the end of your last answer, but being a retailer in this new market, what are some ways that retailers can add value beyond the transaction, especially with such tight regulations?
Yeah, and they are definitely tight and daunting out the gate right now. It's really hard to get a message that connects with consumers out there, because you really can't connect with consumers, it seems. But again, this idea of creative compliance comes to light. We're not going to play the passive role in this and just kind of accept the fate here. We're going to create opportunity. And at Kiaro, we've been focused on really building a strong relationship with our supply partners. That's where it starts. I've always been a firm believer that our first row of customers is our suppliers. And so, we built an educational alignment program that's vested on 4 key pillars. We look at the customer education and customer experience first. You start there. If you empower people, you inspire them, they become not just your customers, they become your advocates. And they can go out there and do that work for you in terms of galvanizing regulators and voting with their wallets, and hopefully voting for changes in provincial and federal regimes that are opposed to what they're trying to pursue and their vision and values. And that educational component in the store extends to really, again, building that relationship with the supply chain again. So many patients in the legacy market, we're so connected to some of the suppliers and those stories and the people and purpose and passion that help build those products and created viable solutions that actually save people's lives. So, we're going back and really digging deep on our supply chain and really creating that intimacy of exchange and learning about the people and the processes and the passion behind each of the products that are on the shelf. We don't try and be a convenience store either. I'm not there to just, puke products on people, because that's the aim, to sell as much as we can. We really have a curated assortment that really speaks to the need state of a well-defined customer demographic. And then we really look to build that narrative with the customer in terms of explaining how these products are manufactured and processed, and the care and intent that goes into that. And we talk about where it comes from. I had the great privilege of going on tours of some of these $1 million facilities. And it's tremendously encouraging to see the energy and the vibe in them. And I want to translate that into the retail experience again, talking about the good work these companies do. I had a chance to go out and visit our friends at 7 Acres in Kincardine, Ontario. They have an amazing vibe with their community. They really cultivate, excellent craft cannabis, and they have a vision and a purpose that, again, translates well in the retail environment. They have great products as well. Great terp profile, Nerfy nugs. It's really good stuff a lot of the time, despite a lot of the challenges with packaging and all the other stuff that we're all upset about. The second pillar of that, which is equally important, is community investment and involvement. So we really look to get out in the community, be proactive. Again, as I mentioned, I serve as a director of Acres. I'm out there advocating, lobbying, working with regulators and decision makers at all levels. We can't stay passive in this. We have to keep engaging. As elections come and people change, there's a lot of curiosity. We're at that crescendo point in the conversation still, a year in. People want to learn about this. The stigma is abating itself slowly in the eyes of a lot of municipalities. They want to learn about cannabis. They want to hear about the value of the regulated environment and how that can help improve public health and safety and address the concerns around the illicit market by providing a path for transition and really, protect the interests of young people. I mean, those are messages and metrics that we can actually deliver as a regulated retailer. And then the third pillar that we really position ourselves around in terms of creating value beyond the transaction is staff education. Again, your frontline staff right now, if you're a retailer, that is your lifeline. You will live or die by the relationships they create at the counter, because the product quality, not in all cases, but in most of them, isn't there yet. People don't like the packaging. Getting ID'd at the front sucks. You're 68 years old coming in and getting ID'd and you forgot. It's absolutely ridiculous sometimes. But you have to take the care. You have to take the consideration. You got to build that conversation. You can't take it for granted. We're earning relationships all over again. So we're literally starting from scratch. And you have to have that humble, stay hungry attitude in this business, because you cannot rest on your laurels. You can really expect nothing. You have to build it all yourself, and you have to do it with the community around you. So I stay well integrated with all of my retailer partners as well. I go out to all their grand openings, spend a ton in their shops if I can that first day. I went out to the City Cannabis grand opening on Cambie and 8th. Spend $200 just watching that stuff fly up and down that tube. If you've seen it, it's absolutely awesome. So I'm talking about my peers. I'm out there and engaged in a positive light. We don't have time to be covetous and competitive right now. We have to build confidence in the market again, and we did that pre-legalization by sticking together as a community, and we're going to do that again. And we focused on training our staff to be able to deliver those messages, get out and be active and informed about what's going on in the environment. And really the lifestyle integration component as well for a lot of consumers who are new to this. How do I transport this according to the legal framework? How do I store this at home safely as a parent? We have those conversations with our customers at Kiaro. And then finally, and this is probably the most important pillar of it all, is data and information exchange. So right now we're learning, again, this whole process over and over again. Now with the phase 2 products coming in, it's going to be a whole galaxy of new questions and uncertainty. I'm excited for the challenge, of course, because I know it's going to meet the need of a lot more consumers and give us an opportunity to buoy our businesses again and get some more revenue. But at the end of the day, we're really vested in continuing the conversations and building understanding with our supply chain, with our local stakeholders, with our MLAs, with our MPs, with our other fellow operators, and again, everyone in the community that's contributed so far. I mean, you have a place to come and have a quality exchange at Kiaro, and we're incredibly excited to keep stewarding that in a positive, purposeful way.
Thanks very much. Very well said, all three of you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. I think we have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes. Let's hear it one more time for the panel. That was great. Does anyone have a question? Anyone? Bueller, apparently they were so informative that you don't have any questions. It's very comprehensive, would be the word. Here we go.
Hi, good morning. Thank you guys so much for your time. Closer? Okay. So I'm from California, and if I understood correctly, you mentioned that you guys are limited to 10 milligram doses per product. Is that correct? As far as medicinally?
The proposed regulations are that you won't be able to have more than 10 milligrams of THC in an edible, in a discrete unit. So you could have a 10 milligram unit or 2 5s. For, say, an edible with the extract, you could have capsules in a container, again, but it can't exceed 10 milligrams of THC, whereas a topical, it's up to a gram, with no package size on the topical.
So I would say recreationally, that's what the proposed limit's going to be. Medicinally, we don't have a limit on our doses. We can go to the doctor and arrange with them the daily amount that we need, and that we can get a recommendation for that and have a medical license that allows us to use more than what a recreational person would be. But because there are no mechanisms for medicinal patients to get their medicine other than what they're proposing in the new recreational stores, they're saying medical people just go line up at a recreational store and all your needs will be met there. And that is not the truth. So if we make our own cookies at home, we can do what we want to with as far as the dose level goes. But if we need to have somebody else make a cookie for us, a lot of my customers that come through are people that don't have a fridge and stove or a mixing bowl to make a brownie in, and they rely on us to have the clean kitchen and the standardized dose ready for them at a reasonable price for them to be able to consume on a daily basis. And sometimes they don't even have a cupboard that they can keep a dozen cookies in for, so they have to be able to come and make a daily purchase. And they can't afford to buy this many cookies if that was what they were relegated to.
Right, and so I'm very passionate about the medicinal side of cannabis, and so I'm curious, as retail operations, how are you guys getting innovative and providing solutions, or do you just have no solutions to offer medicinal patients that come into your stores?
Yeah, I think, the power of anecdote when you are so limited in terms of speaking to the efficacy of cannabis is important. Sharing that personal testimony as much as you can in a credible and genuine way. And again, we're really focused on, encouraging that as much as possible within the framework. Again, the research is out there, and you can point people to that even in a regulated retail environment. Again, the greatest victim of prohibition was the research, and now that's coming to light all around the world. It's undeniable, the proof, and you can point people in that direction, and you can empower them to look at those resources, make up their own mind, make an informed decision, and come back and choose a solution offering that's best aligned with that, with what's available in the retail environment. And then we can, through events and engagement outside of the, designated four-wall retail environment, work and partner with people who are educators on a whole host of different fronts, whether it's medical, therapeutic, recreational. We can participate and sponsor and be a part of events like that to help push that conversation forward, to keep that portion of the community, and there's a large number of them, and even us as recreational consumers over the course of our lives will be impacted by injury, illness, and stress, and we'll have to use cannabis in different ways as we're encumbered by that. So again, the power of testimony and anecdote, really pointing people towards the research, and then helping to support educators that are out there talking about cannabis in more than just a recreational sense. That's what we do to help empower consumers when we're so limited right now.
Hi, my name is Sherry Bennett. I own a company called Let's Talk Cannabis. I work on the front lines with people with pain, severe arthritis, seizures, cancer. Many of my clients are seniors who are getting their cannabis from their grandchildren, and they would like to get it legally, and they're having a constellation of obstacles. Whether one takes cannabis recreationally or for medicinal reasons, our bodies don't know the difference. It's medicine. Cannabis is medicine. And I want to know that, I want to understand what would it take to change the law? Aren't the courts going to be just clogged? They must be already right now, Because many of us, when we understand that every human being has an endocannabinoid system, and that many diseases are a result of a deficiency of the endocannabinoid system. This is a topic that affects every human being, right? Sorry, question is like, what do we have to do to change the law, to change the regulations? What do we have to do? How many more years will it take? You know? Thank you.
Well, I wouldn't say the courts are clogged. Certainly, we have. I used to get people calling me every day with being busted for cannabis. I was called to the bar in 1972, and it went from a few hundred people being busted a year to 10,000, mostly for simple possessions. We don't have that anymore. We don't. There's very few people who've been charged under the Cannabis Act. So, but what you're talking about is these constitutional challenges, and they do take a long time. We have the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine surveying all of the studies to do with cannabis throughout the world a couple of years ago, and concluded that notwithstanding the difficulties in doing the research, there is conclusive evidence that cannabis is effective for chronic pain. What are the people dying on the streets from today? Being prescribed OxyContin and other types of opiates, becoming addicted, and then going to the street when their doctors cut them off and getting a dose of fentanyl. We know that cannabis, we now have double-blind, placebo-based gold standard studies that show that cannabis is one of the best exit strategy drugs to get people off opiates. So, again, it's unfortunate. You would think with the evidence that's available that the governments would be running to do something. We may have to go to court in order to compel them again.
Thank you so. Yeah, thank you so very much. We're out of time. I'm sorry. Let's hear it once again for the panel. That was great.